Hey everybody, welcome to the Skillwork Forum. You might not recognize my face. My name is Cap Chatfield and I'm the communications director here at Skillwork. And today we are going to break down a very exciting new episode for you. We're going to have Tim Ragland, COO of Skillwork, and Brett Elliott, President and CEO of Skillwork, and myself talk about the future of connected manufacturing. We discuss a lot, so we broke this up into two different episodes. Today will be part one. Enjoy.
Well, hello and welcome again to the Skillwork Forum. As always, Tim Ragland here with Skillwork, and I'm joined with my partner, Brett Elliott. And today we have a special guest with us, also part of our Skillwork team. Capus Chatfield is our Director of Communication. So you'll notice he presents better on camera than Brett and I, and that's why he's a Director of Communication, and he speaks really well. And we got him with us here today because we want to talk about a recent forum that we attended. We actually presented at is called Connected Manufacturing, really leaning into the whole Industrial 4.0 and automated manufacturing and the challenges surrounding that. So we were there for a couple of days. We presented and we took a lot of feedback from that and lessons learned and things that we thought we would share here with you, our audience, because we like to not only look at problems today, but where are we going with respect to manufacturing challenges and so forth, particularly around the skilled trade. So welcome, Cap. Appreciate you joining us today. And, broadly, what did you think of the whole, opportunity to go and share? And what did you kind of take away from that?
Well, first, before we get into that, you mentioned, that me being the communications director of communications, having the ability to communicate more effectively than you. I don't know though, that shirt I think is way better for being in front of the camera. If you're seeing the undershirt, looks like a Jason Pollock piece of art right there.
It's pretty sweet.
That's pretty. I love it, man.
Shout out to my wife who picks up my clothes.
So to summarize, what did I really take away from the whole experience, Tim? One thing that really stuck out to me, because I represent the millennial generation. And as we talked about on this show multiple times, the whole idea of skilled labor is just changing dramatically. It's becoming, you've said this before, I think it's a great term. It's less about getting dirt under your nails. It's a lot more clean. It's a lot more technical. It's just smarter. And that's not to downplay the significance of the manual labor that's still, necessary today. But in the world of connected manufacturing, it's just like a whole different world. And I think for me as a guy who helps out with the marketing, who helps really try to communicate our message to the client side and to the skilled workers, I left a lot more impressed and inspired by the manufacturing world in general. And I just see there's just tremendous opportunity. And so for me, I'd love to hear what you thought, Brett, but for me, there's a lot of the world of innovation in the world of connected manufacturing and how that's going to open up opportunities, particularly for Gen Z and Gen Alpha, I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah, no, I agree, Cap. I appreciate you jumping on here with us today. We obviously, our topic up there, was we got to speak into, as we're dealing with this change in the manufacturing world towards this digital transformation, in our world, we recognize, and I think it resonated well with the people up there, the biggest challenge to this digital transformation is the talent, is the skilled trades to do it. So it was great to get to kind of speak on that topic. But you're right, Cap, we talk about it in a variety of ways all the time on this podcast. And that is this idea that you've got the baby boomer group, 5 to 2, 5 leaving, 2 coming in from your generation and the Gen Z. And until we can get the younger generations to get a reset of what the skilled trades, what the blue collar job of the future, and the future is now, is versus, what it was. Again, right. You said it before, there's still going to be a need for just a good old hardy maintenance mechanic that's going to, turn that wrench. Those guys and gals are still needed every day. But the evolution and kind of recapping this show, the level of automation, and we'll talk about some of that probably specifically here, today, is just kind of taking it to a different level of the level of tech, and the experience, and that these generations, and I think you connect with it well. I mean, they're primed and ready. We just got to get them to move into it. So. Well, I think it's one of the things you said, Cap, is really crucial, is that as a millennial, a member of the millennial generation, I mean, the whole mindset shift that needs to take place, the education that needs to happen, that this is not what you may think of when you think of manufacturing. It is very technical.
Yep.
It's very automated, very challenging and innovative. It's a different world. And I think it's important. A big part of what we're doing here is trying to educate people into that. And most of the audience for this podcast are people that are trying to solve these skill trades issues, and connecting with this generation is going to be crucial. And we, not only this generation, but the one that's coming on, Gen Z, we talked about that specifically. So we kind of want to jump into what are some of the key things that really resonated there? And, this forum was represented by a large number of companies that are well known, companies as big as Mars and Honda, and as small as some regional agricultural manufacturing companies. But they're all trying to figure out how to do this connected manufacturing and take advantage of some lessons learned. And we'll talk about some of the challenges as well. But one of the first things, Cap, that I think you recognize was this advent of 3D printing or additive manufacturing, AM. And kind of what was your takeaways when you heard about some of those things?
So I'm not a 3D printing guy, just so you know. So I don't want to pretend like I'm an expert in that area, but I'll start with this. The first time I was ever introduced to 3D printing was a guy actually on the production team at my church. He is kind of more of a handy guy behind the scenes, always fixing problems, loves connecting cables and that whole world. And I don't know how, but he has a 3D printer at his house. And so, it's probably one of those smaller ones, not going to be like these bigger ones that they would have in one of these facilities. But it was the first time that I saw the opportunity that is created with a 3D printer. And, it's like this box that you put in some sort of prompt or some sort of schematic or blueprint, and it literally takes a piece of carbon fiber and it just cuts it into the 3D shape that you need. And the reason why he was particularly valuable with that tool was we had, if we're setting up production for church and this was when we were a mobile church. So we're setting up at a high school, tearing it down. You're losing parts, you're breaking parts a lot more frequently because of the wear and tear of setting stuff up and taking it down. So instead of going and buying these very obscure parts to like an amplifier or an XLR cable or whatever, he would just go home and he would literally print out that part himself and then bring it to church the next week. And we thought like he was like he was Moses on the Mount of Transfiguration. Like he was able to solve these problems so fast with practically no cost to him or to anybody for very nuanced and detailed parts. And so that was the beginning of my understanding of 3D printing. But at this conference, there was a guy who I can't quite remember what company he represented, but he was talking about how in their facilities, they were really getting aggressive in using 3D printing in their facilities to create some of these nuanced parts that were needing to be replaced or were breaking down quite frequently. And in one example, he said that there was a part that they would go and buy regularly from a vendor for $100. If you remember that, it was about $100 for every time they purchased this part. And then they tried doing 3D printing of that same part. It wasn't a very complicated or complex part that they needed to buy. They brought down that price from $100 to about $1 per unit. So think about from an ROI standpoint, you might be thinking, okay, to put in a 3D printer in our facility, how much is that going to cost? And how much time is it going to take? And then hiring the talent to maintain that piece of equipment. But once you have that thing in your facility, if you know how to use it, they just brought down the cost of one part from $100 to $1. And I think the CEO, when he was told about what they were able to do, he said, how do we do this for everything in our facility? Because from an executive standpoint, a financial standpoint, it just makes everything, it removes the friction completely. And and increases your profitability. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea, and starts 3D printing, people know that term, but in the manufacturing space, it's kind of transitioning to AM, or additive manufacturing,
Yep.
which essentially you're adding layers to something to produce the end product. You're additively adding capability. So you may start out with the basic form,
Sure.
3D printing, and then you add layers to it. So the whole idea is that you can accelerate concept to actual working prototype very rapidly.
Yep.
You can prototype something, put it out there, see if it works before even a new product, before you go to mass manufacturing. So it is really speeding up the idea, the process from a thought to a physical thing. So
and eliminating the risk, right? Of
Right.
rather than going all in on this is the new product, and even this is the prototype with, all of the different types of materials and engineering that's required for that. This makes testing a lot faster and a lot less risky.
yeah, I'm thinking, Brett, in your experience when you were running manufacturing facilities, if you had had something like this to, produce, let's see if we could produce this on the spot, could you see where that would have, instead of waiting for a vendor and, basically.
Like 3D printed bacon.
What? I don't know about that part, but I think the thing that is you, and I was guilty of this when 3D printing first started getting talked about in the manufacturing, and it was kind of done in labs and, people that would have been, I'm sure that gentleman that has the 3D print was the same guy that stood in line to get an iPhone for 5 hours. See him at a trade show and go, that's cool looking at this. Yeah. So, I kind of looked at it like that, but now that it has, you start to see some of the uses of it and things. If you really, it's really not that much of a stretch, because we still go in a lot of the facilities that we work in today. They still have machine shops. They still have an old lathe or an old, press. And so they're making parts, now most of the time at that time, most of the stuff was made out of steel or metals of some sort, because that's, aluminum and different things. But so really, if you think about it, plants have been making the investment to make their own, because if a shaft broke, we can't shut the line down, we'll do that. This just takes it to a whole different level, because in that shop, that machine shop, they can't get into the nuanced small pieces and parts. So really, I think the evolution as it continues to kind of go, I think some of that, I mean, obviously there's still the need to make shafts and whatnot as well, but I don't think it's as big as, in my own mind, a stretch. And specifically to answer your question, Timmy, 100%. I mean, the little things, the stuff that you had to carry tons and tons of parts for, to now with some of this technology, you're not going to have, you'll be able to be more, just in time. Yeah, to manage. It is compelling. I mean, I was at a training facility for skilled traders, and they were learning electromechanical and other skills that we talk about all the time. And they had a very advanced lab, and this connected the dots for me. Well, they had a 3D printing capability, and it did not look like what I think of in, just in kind of a technology R&D thing. I mean, it was a piece of manufacturing looking equipment that you might see in a machine shop, and they were producing 3D objects, but they were training guys on how to set that up, how to repair that machine. Because again, you put this in your facility, great, you can produce that part. What about when the machine doesn't work? I mean, you're always going to come back to needing somebody that knows how to run it or fix it or program it. And that's where we come in. So that was a pretty cool thing. We got a couple other things that kind of come to mind. And I think at the end of this, we'll tie this up with the whole state of the fourth industrial revolution. We got some thoughts on that. But the next thing is this idea of a digital twin. And digital twin, if you're not familiar with that, is basically you have a brick and mortar facility. Think about your manufacturing facility. We'll take Brett's plant that he had sitting there out of town in Iowa. It exists physically. A digital twin is to have a replica of that down to the minute detail digitally, virtually, so that you can do a lot of cool things you want to talk about. So that's the idea of creating a digital twin.
So that was really an exciting conversation for me, because I grew up in the Pokemon Go era, which is, if anyone's watching is familiar with that, basically AR.
We'll be praying for Cap.
Yeah, I do. It's a funny story. My wife actually was playing Pokemon Go at the beach a few years ago, and she's embarrassed to say this. So sorry, Joy, if you ever happen, I don't know why she would watch this podcast, but if she ever happens to, she got in a bike accident because she was riding a bike trying to catch something so basically the idea, like, what are you talking about? It's this video game on your phone that uses AR, augmented reality, where it uses the camera so you're able to see the actual real world around you, but it's putting in these, in this game, Pokemon Go, it's putting these characters in the game that you can go and catch and collect. And so it's basically like if I had my phone up at this table right now, you could see something there through the phone that wasn't actually there in real life. And that's really what digital twinning really is, or creating a digital twin of your facility. It's applying that same technology so that you can either, whether you're creating a whole new facility or you're trying to figure out, okay, we want to add this piece of technology or machinery into our facility. Where are we going to make it fit? How can we actually make it work within the square footage of what we have here without buying it, bringing it in, moving everything around, and think of all the, the risk, the expense. What happens if it doesn't work? You're already having, you have a great operation already in place. Are you going to tear that apart to try this thing that might not work? And then the risk of trying to put it back together and it not be perfect. This eliminates all of that risk. And so for me, what's so super interesting about this is, particularly for executives, business leaders, scalability, being innovative, being able to think and imagine how the 3D printer idea, how about that? You might be interested in this 3D printer idea and adding that to your facility. This would allow you to essentially figure out how that can work without going all in on buying it, putting it in there, and possibly ruining your current operation. So,
yeah, I mean, we've seen this too, the advent of this, Brad, and seeing it, and we're like, again, my first impression, maybe because of our generation, is like, it's kind of cool, but how does that help me, produce bacon? Yeah. So the idea of it is, and now the technology is advancing. I mean, essentially you create a digital blueprint down to the minutest detail of your facility. And we listened to a panel on digital twin, and there were a couple of heavy hitters represented there. There was somebody from Toyota, a gentleman from Toyota, and a gentleman from Mars, the candy maker. And I remember it stuck with me that Toyota says they currently have 6 million, with an M, 6 million square feet of their facilities currently digitized, completely digitized. And I'm like, that's
insane.
That's one. And Mars, the candy bar, who knew that making candy bars was so technical? But they were down to laser, augmented reality, laser measuring each candy bar to know the thickness of the chocolate layer around each candy bar so that they could optimize the amount of chocolate they were using to fit in the packaging. And I mean, it was like, and when they want to introduce a new candy bar, they run it through the virtual line to be able to figure out, what about packaging? What about all the content? And I'm like, this is mind blowing.
Yeah.
That they're doing all this. Instead, what they would have to used to do is like, well, let's try it.
Yep.
Let's put a hole in the ceiling and put that big piece of gear down the line and see if it'll work.
Yep.
Oh, it's crazy.
No, I'm right there with you. It, like I said, it's probably our generation, Tim, Cap growing up, in our generation in technology, really being there, probably quicker to adapt or adopt some of these ideas. When I first started hearing about the digital twin thing, it really made no sense to me, to be honest with you. And I thought, nobody's, what are you
What are you doing for? That's the real thing out here.
But I can tell you, and if you're somebody that's running a manufacturing facility, or you're working in a manufacturing facility, or whatever the case may be, this statement I'm about to make will be like, yeah, for sure, is by far one of the biggest costs, and the thing that we would always miss on what it was going to cost us is startup costs. And so starting up a new facility or starting up a new line, the cost to do that, because it was all trial and error. You put it in, even though you had another line exactly like it right next to it, it didn't matter. It would take weeks if you were lucky, but typically months to get this line up to the efficiency of this line. And it was for a variety of things. You have to move this and do this and do that. So it now makes total sense to me on the digital twin and the ability to, if you're building a new plant, get everything fit in, get everything, we built a new cook bacon plant, many years ago. And, my dad, led that project for me, and hours and hours and hours of looking at blueprints and rethinking and going, oh, we got to change that. We got to change. If we had had this type of technology, the ability to simulate and to trial and check and do is it's a big idea. It's why, clearly as we saw, the big companies, but now it's coming down even smaller. I mean, they've embraced it and they're doing it.
I mean, just think about this, practically speaking. You want to redo your kitchen at your house, and you take all the measurements, and you go into your big box store, and you go back there, and there's somebody sitting on a computer. They take your measurements. They come up with a digital,
like a rendering,
a digital rendering, and then let's try these cabinets. Let's try this counter. Let's move this window here. You do the whole thing digitally. That's essentially, they're creating a digital twin of your home and figuring out what you want. Before, back in the old days, you sit down with, work. So handyman, come up with some ideas, get it up there, and halfway through, he's like, well, that's not what I thought. Yeah. Rip it out, try it again. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
In the old days, there was, the old saying, measure twice and cuss once. And that's the way we did it, because you never measured right. And but this, the ability for what this does and the level of technology that it brings in, which brings in these whole, again, pulling it back to these younger generations. I mean, this stuff, this is the opportunity. It's really cool opportunities and stuff for these younger generations to step into the manufacturing world in these technology fields.
And for like your generation, it's not just like, well, we got to do this stuff because it'll attract them. No, it makes a lot of business sense, and you take advantage. Yep. So
100%.
It's a win-win. And by the way, you said measure twice and cut once. I always thought it was cuss once.
Yeah,
I was wrong all along.
That is so funny.
It is.
There's a lot of truth to that too.
Yeah, exactly. So cut, you mean to make sure that's a We really appreciate your time. Pray that you're blessed by it, and appreciate you joining us here on the Skillwork Forum. Until next time, have a great day.